Canine dog risks his life to save his injured partner. What happens next? The sky above Birchwood County was heavy with gray clouds, and the wind pushed leaves across the road like scattered memories. Deputy Marlowe Keene sat alone in his patrol truck, staring out the windshield at nothing. His shift had just started, but he already felt exhausted. The kind of tiredness that lives in your bones, not just from lack of sleep, but from carrying the weight of too many regrets. Marlowe was new to the Birchwood Sheriff's Department. He didn't want to be there, not really. But after what happened in the city, after the mess with internal affairs and the fallout from his younger brother's death, this quiet town was the only place left that would take him. He was a man of few words now. Once he had been quick to joke, warm to strangers, but those days felt like they belonged to someone else. At the station that morning, Sheriff Landry had handed him a thick file and said, "You're getting a partner." Marlowe raised an eyebrow. He didn't have partners anymore. "It's not a person," the sheriff added. "It's a dog. Named Ziv, Belgian Malinois. Came from a military program, bounced around a bit. Real sharp, real intense." Marlowe didn't answer. He took the file and walked out. He wasn't thrilled about working with a dog, especially one with a past, but orders were orders. At the canine kennel, Ziv stood behind the steel gate of his cage, staring with eyes so dark they almost looked black. His ears twitched as Marlowe approaches, but he didn't bark or wag his tail. He didn't do anything at all, just stared. "Well," Marlowe said quietly, kneeling down near the gate, "guess we're stuck with each other." Ziv didn't move. The handler on duty, a thin man with a faded ball cap, said, "He doesn't warm up to folks quickly, has trust issues. You'll have to earn it." Marlowe sighed. "Yeah, don't we all?" The next few days were rough. Ziv didn't listen to commands and didn't seem interested in forming a bond. Marlowe tried food rewards, toys, even just quiet time, but nothing worked. Ziv watched him like he was waiting for something bad to happen. Still, they rode together. The cruiser became a shared space, even if silence filled it. At first, Ziv sat rigid in the back seat, but on the third day, he climbed into the front and stared out the window. That night, after another shift of empty calls and routine patrols, Marlowe returned Ziv to his kennel at the training facility. But as he walked away, something tugged at him. He turned and saw Ziv, still watching him through the bars. Not with fear, not with hate, just waiting. Marlowe hesitated. Then he walked back, sat down on the cold floor outside the kennel, and rested his arms on his knees. "You don't trust me," he said softly. "I get it. I've let people down before. My brother," he paused, swallowing hard. "His name was Elias. He trusted me to protect him, and I didn't. Now he's gone." Ziv blinked slowly but didn't move. Marlowe looked away. "Maybe you're like me. Maybe you lost someone too. Or maybe you just learned that people can't be trusted." The wind rattled the side of the building, and for a while there was only silence between them. Then Ziv stood. Slowly he stepped forward, closer to the bars. He pressed his nose gently against the metal, right near Marlowe's knee. Marlowe looked down, surprised. "Well," he said with a small breath, "I guess that's something." The bond wasn't strong yet, but it had begun. Over the next week, Ziv started following basic commands. He responded to Marlowe's voice more than anyone else's, and though he still didn't play or wag his tail, he now rode in the passenger seat like he belonged there. That Saturday night, the air smelled like rain. The sky was pitch black except for a few blinking street lamps. Marlowe and Ziv cruised slowly down back roads on the edge of town. No one was out. Even the usual stray cats had vanished. "Have you ever noticed," Marlowe said to Ziv, "how the quietest nights always feel the most dangerous?" Ziv didn't respond, of course, but his ears twitched. They passed an old gas station, long shut down, its sign hanging by one rusted chain. Across the road stood an abandoned grain warehouse, big, boxy, and dark. Marlowe had always felt uneasy around that place. It had too many windows and not enough light. As the cruiser rolled past, Ziv stiffened. His body went tense. He let out a low, deep growl. Marlowe sat up straight, His instincts suddenly alert. He turned down the radio. "What is it?" he asked. Ziv's eyes were fixed on the warehouse. Marlowe slowed the vehicle and pulled to the side. He reached for his flashlight. "All right," he muttered, opening the door. "Let's check it out." The moment he stepped out, Ziv followed, sticking close to his side. No leash needed now. Ziv was locked in, focused, and ready. They moved toward the warehouse, footsteps crunching on gravel. The air was still, too still. Then Marlowe caught a scent, faint, metallic, like blood or rust. Suddenly, Ziv let out a sharp bark. Crack! The gunshot echoed like thunder. Marlowe felt fire tear through his side. He staggered, the flashlight slipping from his hand. His knees hit the ground. Pain exploded in his ribs. Blood soaked through his uniform. He gasped, trying to stay upright. Then he heard Ziv, growling, charging. More noise, a scream, a struggle. Marlowe clutched his radio with shaking fingers. "Officer down," he whispered, barely able to breathe. "I need help." Then everything blurred. Before the darkness swallowed him, he saw one last thing. Ziv, standing between him and the shadows, baring his teeth, daring the world to try again.
The world came back slowly. First, there was sound. Machines beeping, soft footsteps, voices speaking in low tones. Then came the pain. A sharp, burning ache in Marlowe's side. He tried to move but couldn't. His whole body felt heavy. He opened his eyes. The room was white and too bright. A nurse stood nearby, checking a monitor. She turned when she saw him. "You're awake," she said gently. "Don't try to sit up. You were shot, but the surgery went well. You're safe now." Marlowe blinked, trying to clear the fog in his head. "Ziv?" he asked, voice hoarse. The nurse smiled. "He's right here." At the side of the bed, curled up on the floor, was Ziv. His head lifted the moment he heard Marlowe's voice. He stood, walked to the bed, and rested his chin gently on Marlowe's arm. "You stayed," Marlowe whispered, tears stinging his eyes. Ziv didn't bark or whine. He just looked at him, calm and alert, like he was making sure Marlowe wasn't a dream. The nurse shook her head in wonder. "We couldn't get him to leave. He wouldn't even let the doctors near you at first." Marlowe reached out with a shaky hand and touched Ziv's fur. It was warm and soft, but he could feel the tension in the dog's body. Ziv was still on high alert. "You're a good boy," Marlowe murmured. "You saved my life." Ziv licked Marlowe's fingers once, then lay his head down again. Later that day, the door opened and Deputy Silas Trent walked in. He was Marlowe's former partner from another precinct. Tall, with tired eyes and a half smile, Silas pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. "You look like hell," he said. "Feels worse than it looks," Marlowe said, forcing a smirk. Silas nodded towards Ziv. "He gave everyone a scare, wouldn't leave your side. I had to promise him jerky just to get past the door." Marlowe chuckled, then winced in pain. "Seriously though," Silas said, his tone growing serious. "This wasn't random. I've been digging. That alley you were in, it wasn't on your regular route." Marlowe frowned. "Dispatch changed it last minute." "Exactly," Silas said. "And the shooter? Not just some street punk. He knew where to wait and how to shoot." Marlowe's stomach sank. "You think I was targeted?" Silas looked him straight in the eyes. "I think this ties back to Elias." Marlowe's heart skipped. Elias, his younger brother, had been a rookie cop working undercover in a narcotics unit. He died during a raid gone wrong, but Marlowe never believed the official story. It always felt unfinished. "What did you find?" Marlowe asked. Silas lowered his voice. "The guy who shot you had your name in his car. A printed patrol schedule. Someone gave it to him." Marlowe's hand curled into a fist on the blanket. Ziv picked up on his anger and stood, body tense, eyes scanning the room. "Easy, boy," Marlowe whispered. Ziv slowly relaxed, but didn't sit back down. Silas leaned closer. "There's something else. I found a flash drive in your old brother's things. I hadn't opened it before, but I looked through it last night." And he was onto something big. A group inside law enforcement working with traffickers, covering up deals, rerouting evidence. He had names, photos. One of them still works in Birchwood. Marlowe stared at the ceiling, his mind spinning. "Elias died trying to expose them." Silas nodded. "And now they want to shut you up too." The next few days were a blur. Marlowe tried to rest, but his mind raced. He watched Ziv carefully. The dog never left his side. If someone opened the door too fast or stepped too close, Ziv growled low and dangerous. One afternoon, a janitor named Cam came into the room to mop the floor. He was about 20, quiet and polite. Ziv stood when he entered, but didn't growl. "You're the dog everyone's been talking about," Cam said, smiling nervously. Ziv sniffed the air and tilted his head. Cam moved slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. "My brother used to have a dog like you. We lost him a few years back, and we lost my brother too. Police shooting. Wrong place, wrong time." Marlowe looked at Cam, surprised. "Sorry to hear that," he said softly. Cam gave a small shrug. "Life's rough sometimes, but dogs like yours, they make it easier." As Cam finished cleaning, Ziv walked over and sat near him, tail still, watching closely. "Guess he trusts you," Marlowe said. Cam smiled, reached out and gently scratched behind Ziv's ears. The sheriff came by later that evening. Sheriff Landry was old school, gruff, grey-haired and not fond of questions. "We're calling it a robbery gone wrong," he told Marlowe. "The shooter's dead. We don't need more trouble." Marlowe narrowed his eyes. "It wasn't a robbery. It was a hit." Landry frowned. "Don't go chasing shadows, Keen. You're lucky to be alive." Marlowe glanced at Ziv, then back at the sheriff. "So was my brother, and now he's dead." Landry's jaw tightened. "Let it go." When the sheriff left, Marlowe turned to Ziv. "He knows something." Ziv growled, almost like he agreed. That night, as Marlowe lay in bed unable to sleep, he whispered to Ziv, "I didn't protect Elias when he needed me, but I swear to you, I won't make that mistake again." Ziv crawled up gently beside him, resting his head on Marlowe's chest. For the first time since the shooting, Marlowe let the tears fall. A week had passed since the hospital shooting. Marlowe's wound was healing, but slowly. His side still ached when he moved too fast or breathed too deep. Still, he pushed through. He couldn't sit still, not with the truth about Elias so close. Ziv never left him. Even when nurses came in with medicine or food, Ziv stayed alert, watching every hand, every movement. He slept lightly and always near the door, like he was guarding Marlowe from the world. One evening, Silas returned with a grim look on his face. He closed the door behind him and dropped a thick manila folder on Marlowe's lap. "What's this?" Marlowe asked. "Proof," Silas said. "I went through Elias's flash drive again. I cross-checked the files with people still working here. One name kept popping up. Cade Darrell." Marlowe's eyes narrowed. "The narcotics officer?" Silas nodded. "He worked undercover with Elias. Disappeared off the radar right after Elias died. Transferred here 6 months ago. Quiet, friendly, low profile." Marlowe flipped through the folder. Inside were photos, documents, even screenshots of texts between Cade and someone listed only as R. "They planned the hit," Marlowe said softly. "He knew I was digging. He knew I wouldn't stop." "There's more," Silas said. "Cade is still active. He's been using a storage facility on the edge of town, under a fake name. I checked it out from the street. It's quiet, but something feels off. You want to go?" Marlowe nodded slowly. "I have to." That night, after the hospital cleared him for temporary leave, Marlowe slipped out with Ziv at his side. He wasn't strong enough to chase someone down, but he could walk and think, and Ziv would handle the rest. They took Silas's car, parked down the block from the storage facility, and approached on foot. The place looked abandoned. Rows of metal doors, a busted streetlight flickering above. Ziv walked beside Marlowe, tail down, ears twitching. Every few steps, he paused and sniffed the air. Marlowe stopped near unit number 17. "This is the one." Ziv gave a low growl. Marlowe pressed his ear to the metal door. He heard voices, faint but clear. "Shipment's late," one voice said. "Keep it quiet. We don't want attention," another replied. Marlowe reached for the small radio clipped to his belt, then froze. If Cade really was dirty, he might have eyes everywhere. If Marlowe called it in, someone could tip Cade off before backup even got there. He turned to Ziv. "It's just us." Ziv's dark eyes locked on his, as if to say, "I'm ready." Marlowe drew his sidearm, took a breath and kicked the door hard. It flew open, slamming against the wall with a loud bang. Inside, 2 men turned in shock. Cade Darrell was one of them. "Marlowe?" Cade said, his face twisting. "You're supposed to be in a hospital bed." Marlowe stepped forward, gun aimed. "Funny. That's what your guy thought when he shot me." "You don't understand what you're getting into," Cade said, stepping sideways toward a table. "I understand enough," Marlowe snapped. "You set up my brother. You watched him die, and then you came for me." Ziv growled low. his body crouched and ready. "You should have stayed quiet," Cade said coldly, and reached for a weapon hidden beneath a box. Everything happened fast. Cade pulled a gun. Marlowe fired first, but the shot grazed Cade's arm, not enough to stop him. Ziv lunged. The other man in the room ran, but Ziv ignored him. His focus was on Cade. The dog hit him like a bullet, knocking him into the wall. Cade screamed as Ziv latched onto his wrist, forcing the gun to drop. "Ziv, hold!" Marlowe shouted. Ziv froze, his teeth still gripping Cade's arm, but not biting deeper. Cade groaned in pain, his body pinned. Marlowe walked over slowly, keeping his gun raised. "You planned all of this. You killed Elias because he found your operation. He was going to ruin everything," Cade spat. "Do you have any idea how much money we were making? He was going to waste it all on some noble fantasy." "He was doing his job," Marlowe said coldly, "the one you threw away." Sirens blared in the distance now. Silas had called it in behind the scenes. He must have followed them from the hospital just in case. Ziv growled again. "Good boy," Marlowe whispered. An hour later, Cade was in cuffs. Officers collected evidence from the storage unit. Guns, drugs, money, fake IDs. It was a full-blown trafficking ring hidden behind storage lockers. Silas walked over to Marlowe and clapped him gently on the shoulder. "You were right about everything." Marlowe looked down at Ziv, who stood silently beside him. "No," he said, "we were right." Ziv's tail gave a single wag. But the night wasn't over yet. As they drove back to the hospital, Marlowe stared out the window in silence. His mind raced. Everything Cade had said replayed in his head. Your brother was a threat. He got in the way. Marlowe's fingers clenched into fists. "I let Elias down," he whispered. "No, you didn't," Silas said. "You brought the truth to light. That's what he would have wanted." Ziv sat in the back seat now, resting his head between the front seats. He licked Marlowe's ear, then leaned closer, almost like he was hugging him. Marlowe reached back and rubbed behind Ziv's ears. "Thank you," he said softly, "for saving me again." Back at the hospital, the nurses helped Marlowe into bed. His side throbbed with fresh pain from all the movement, but it was a pain he could handle. Ziv jumped onto the foot of the bed and lay down, his eyes finally soft and tired. "You did good, buddy," Marlowe murmured. "We did good." Ziv wagged his tail once, then rested his head on Marlowe's feet, refusing to sleep until he knew his partner was safe. The room fell quiet. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. 3 weeks had passed since the night Marlowe and Ziv stopped Cade Darrell. The case made headlines across the state. News anchors called it a massive betrayal inside law enforcement. The photos from the warehouse, guns, drugs, fake IDs were all over the internet. And Cade Darrell? He was now behind bars, awaiting trial, with a long list of charges and a short list of people still willing to defend him. But Marlowe didn't care about the headlines. He cared about Elias, and he cared about Ziv. Marlowe sat quietly at his brother's grave, a cool breeze brushing the back of his neck. He held a small box in his hands, a police badge, his own. It felt heavier than it looked. Ziv sat beside him, ears perked, watching the trees sway in the wind. He didn't make a sound. "I thought this badge meant I was doing the right thing," Marlowe said aloud, voice calm but tired. "But Elias, you were the one who really did the right thing, even when it cost you everything." He opened the box and took the badge out, running his thumb over the number etched into the silver. "I'm done with the Force," he whispered. "I've seen enough. I've lost enough. It's time I did something else, something good." He placed the badge gently at the base of the gravestone. Ziv stepped forward, sniffed the badge, then sat beside it as if standing guard. 2 months later, Marlowe stood outside a freshly painted white building at the edge of town. A wooden sign above the door read, "The Haven, Canine Healing and Training Center." It wasn't fancy, it didn't need to be. Inside were wide open spaces, soft beds, clean kennels, and most of all, peace. Marlowe had used his savings, along with help from Silas and a few other trusted officers, to build the place from scratch. It would be a home for retired canines, abused working dogs, and those who couldn't be placed in regular homes. Ziv was the first resident, but he wasn't alone for long. Cam, the quiet janitor from the hospital, stood near the back fence, tossing a tennis ball for a shy, one-eyed shepherd named Luna. She'd been found tied behind an abandoned house, underfed and scared. Now she ran across the yard like she'd been born to play. "She's really coming out of her shell," Cam said, smiling. "She just needed someone to trust." Marlowe replied, watching Ziv lie calmly nearby. Cam looked over. Kind of like Ziv, huh? Marlowe nodded. Exactly like him. Ziv lifted his head and gave a low bark, like he was joining the conversation. Cam laughed. He always knows when you're talking about him. The days at the Haven were full of routine, simple things, morning feedings, short hikes, light training for anxious dogs, and quiet nights under the stars. But even with peace returning, Marlowe still had hard moments. There were nights when he woke from dreams about Elias, or times when he saw a patrol car pass and felt his stomach twist. One evening, he found himself staring at the framed photo on his desk, Elias, in uniform, smiling with his hand on Marlowe's shoulder. Ziv padded over and laid his head in Marlowe's lap. "Thanks, buddy," Marlowe said, running his hand through Ziv's fur. "I miss him, but I think he'd be proud of this." Ziv didn't move. He just stayed close. One weekend, the Haven held its first open house. Families came to meet the dogs. Volunteers signed up to help. A reporter from the local paper stopped by and asked Marlowe for a quote. He didn't say much. Just, "These dogs gave everything to protect others. Now it's our turn to protect them." The article ran the next day with a photo of Marlowe and Ziv sitting side by side under a tree. The headline read, "From battlefields to backyards, healing begins at the Haven." Weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. More dogs arrived. Some found homes. Some stayed forever. Ziv became a kind of legend. The silent guardian, people called him. He didn't bark much, but when he walked into a room, every dog quieted. They respected him, trusted him. So did the people. Cam, now a full-time staff member, said it best. "Ziv doesn't just protect you, he teaches you how to protect yourself." Then one day, as the sun set over the fields, Marlowe stood in the training yard watching a nervous young shepherd go through an obstacle course. The dog hesitated at every jump, unsure and shaky. Ziv, sitting nearby, stood up. Without a command, he trotted over and ran the course smoothly, then turned back to the young shepherd and barked once. The shepherd tried again. This time he didn't stop. Marlowe watched, heart full. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's the whole point." Later that night, after all the dogs were fed and the lights were off, Marlowe sat on the front porch. Ziv rested beside him, calm as ever. "You know," Marlowe said, "I used to think this job, the badge, the gun, that's what made me strong." He looked down at Ziv. "But you showed me it's not about that. It's about what you protect and who you do it for." Ziv let out a quiet huff and laid his head on Marlowe's foot. The stars stretched above them like a promise. Marlowe closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel broken. He felt whole, and he wasn't alone. Not anymore.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Love Tales of Tales, for long, heartwarming pets and animals, love stories that stay with you long after they end.